Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023 Council meeting, and we're beginning right at 6 p.m. And at this time, I'd like to do the land acknowledgement that we do here each month. We honor all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. We acknowledge that the ancestral and traditional lands on which we gather are land of the Blackfoot Confederacy and Treaty 7 territory, a traditional meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples, and in particular our neighbors, Siksika Nation, on whose traditional territory we work, live, and play, and on whose traditional territory we stand and where Strathmore resides. At this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors tonight? Seeing none. Legislative services or admin? No? Okay, thank you. Then looking for a motion to Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move that Council adopt the May 3rd, 2023 regular Council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We have no public hearing tonight, and I believe there are no public comments. No one's calling in. And that brings us to delegations. We have some guests here tonight. 5.1, Bird Canada regarding electric scooters potentially in Strathmore. If you wouldn't mind coming to the microphone and introducing yourselves or yourself. Michael, are you online?
I am, yes.
Good evening and welcome. And you'll be presenting on behalf of Bird Canada regarding electric scooters?
That is correct. Thank you very much. If you give me one brief moment.
Thank you. And just a reminder, you have 10 minutes to present, but there could be more time from councillors as far as questions and comments.
Perfect. Do I have the capacity to share my screen? There we go. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Cavato, Director of Government Partnerships for Bird. For those unfamiliar, we are a shared electric vehicle company specializing in what they call micromobility. So those are those vehicle types that are electrified and best suited to trips that are less than 5 miles. Our mission was initially to solve what they call the first last mile problem, meaning that last little bit of distance that is between a public transit stop and a person's ultimate destination. As time has progressed, we have since identified that this is a functional public transportation network that can help reduce congestion, improve air quality, and improve the overall quality of life within cities. The way that our system works is very similar to some of the bike share systems you might already be familiar with. Individuals will download a mobile application on their phone, be able to see one of our devices either throughout the community or via the map functionality on the app. They then create a profile, go through a safety tutorial, scan the scooter to unlock it, take it where they need to go, usually somewhere around 5 to 10 minutes away, before hitting a button to end their ride. At the end of their ride, they must photograph the scooter to prove that they have parked appropriately, at which point the vehicle then becomes available for the next person. So multiple short trips per day per device. What you see here is our Bird 3 scooter. This is our latest generation of device. Each one of these is equipped with what's known as an IoT device, basically a fancy GPS connected to around 200 sensors that allows us to control where the scooters can and can't go, at what speed they travel at, where they can park, and a whole host of other functionality. Every single scooter is also equipped with 24/7 contact information, including a telephone number, email address, and multiple social media accounts that people can use to get a hold of us, whether they are a rider or not, if they'd like to report any concerns with one of the devices. In terms of our pricing, it is $1.15 to unlock, plus a certain number of cents per minute, depending on different city factors. What you usually see is a rough average of between $5 and $7 to get a person directly from point A to point B, quickly, cleanly, and with an element of fun. We also offer our community pricing program for those that qualify, which includes those who qualify due to low income status, veterans, senior citizens, healthcare workers, and members of select nonprofit organizations within the communities that we partner with. As we were the first company in the world to introduce shared electric scooters, it has given us an opportunity to hone our technology to a point that is what I would say in my slightly biased fashion, superior to our competitors. What you see here are examples of our no ride zones, no parking zones, and slow zones. No ride zones are areas where if a rider takes the scooter, it will slow down to about 1.5 miles per hour, start beeping and flashing at them, and prevent them from ending their ride, meaning they continue to incur a charge on their credit card until they exit the area. No park zones means an individual can travel through that area, but cannot end their ride in that area. Think of it as perhaps on a trail within a park, which might not be appropriate to have a scooter ending a ride on, but might still be useful to have somebody be able to travel through on their commute. And slow zones are reduced speed areas. We typically cap the scooters at around 24 kilometers per hour. Let's assume that this is a particularly pedestrian heavy area. We may wish to reduce that speed down to, say, between 12 and 15 kilometers per hour. So like a light jog, well, call it 10 kilometers per hour for a light jog. We've also worked hard to develop a number of different safety measures, including warm-up mode for new users. What this does is it reduces the acceleration profile and the maximum speed of the devices until somebody's a little bit more comfortable with the device, at which point it gradually increases so that they gain some familiarity before reaching the maximum speed. Safe Start is a function that we built out to help prevent those who might have had a couple of drinks from thinking this is a good idea to use to get home. What it does is it creates or it poses a small cognitive test to individuals that they must pass before the scooter will unlock between certain hours of the day, typically 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., just to make sure that people are, it creates another barrier to make sure people are in the right state of mind. I mentioned earlier, we have a whole bunch of different parking management features. To go into a little bit more detail, this includes incentivized parking, no parking zones, or even designated parking under certain conditions, such as if there is a community event or town-wide, say, parade or something along those lines. Finally, in the interest of being incredibly transparent, we provide all of the communities that we work with real-time data dashboards that provide all of the information related to the utilization, where every single device is currently located, what status it's in, meaning is it in a ride, has it been reported as being in need of service, is it available for a ride, is it being recharged, etc. All at no cost to the city. This means that there is complete oversight and complete control for the city so that they have the ability to see exactly how the fleet is performing. With that, I hope I'm under the 10-minute mark, and I would be happy to field any questions that may come from council. Appreciate the opportunity to speak here this evening.
Thank you for your presentation, and we'll have different councillors probably asking you some questions. Councillor Wegener.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I've just got a couple of questions. First of all, I think this is probably a pretty good idea. I've just got, I guess, first question, is there any cost to the town?
Excellent question. No, there is no cost to the town. Unlike traditional bike share systems, because of the popularity of these systems, they can be profitable without any kind of subsidy. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows it's actually good for small businesses as well. Emory University released a study about 2 years ago, which showed that every single individual e-scooter contributed roughly $2,200 American over a 6-month period in additional spending to local businesses. So definitely some economic benefit.
Okay, thank you for that one. Now, I spend a lot of time in Calgary, and I see these in Calgary as well. Are helmets provided by Bird, or is this up to the individual user?
Great question. So we have a number of different means of providing helmets. This includes free helmet giveaways that we host at different safety events, as well as allowing an individual to request that a helmet be delivered directly to their doorstep through our mobile application or website at no cost other than shipping and handling. So about $9.
Okay, thank you. Now, 25 kilometers an hour is a fairly fast speed. And I know you can adjust things, and that was one of my questions. We have a lot of pathways in town here where, especially in and around the downtown, where there is the seniors in that. So my question you have answered, so it can be adjusted to wherever it is required. The one downfall I see with these and what I see in Calgary is they get abandoned everywhere. I've seen them abandoned and parked in the, like on the roadways, across the sidewalks. So again, if we have elderly out walking around, there's these scooters there. We do have a couple of lakes here. I'm curious if the fire department is going to have to go diving and pull them out eventually. But that's kind of just the one thing where I guess again, part of the
Excellent.
onus can be on the rider. But those are my questions. Thank you.
Excellent point, Councilmember. I know that last piece was not a question, but if you'll permit me the opportunity to provide some additional clarity in terms of how we manage that. We have operational staff and partners locally based who are proactively checking on every single device that is within the community multiple times per day. That ensures that if there is an issue, oftentimes we can correct it before it presents a nuisance to the community. Further, we have that 24/7 contact information on every device. So if for whatever reason, in between one of those regular check-ins, somebody says, hey, this scooter's knocked over, I don't like where it is, they can report that into us and we will dispatch somebody to go out there and correct that issue immediately. In terms of the lakes, the Bird 3 is IP68 rated, which means that it can be completely submerged for an extended period of time. We're talking days without any damage to the battery or any damage to the environment. We also have special tools to recover any devices that are thrown into bodies of water to help ensure that we have everything necessary. I'm going to get a little bit silly here, but I think this thing is really cool. It looks kind of like a grappling hook attached to a very thick cord. You throw it in there, helps you pull the device out.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Wegner. A quick question for you, Michael. Are you operating in other communities that are similar size to Strathmore?
Yes, absolutely. We operate in over 425 cities globally. So that includes the US, Europe, and Canada. In terms of Strathmore, we operate from communities that have roughly 6,000 individuals up to the, I believe it's 20 or 12 million within the greater Los Angeles area. We've seen a considerable amount of utilization throughout all of these. In Strathmore, I'm trying to think of a good comparable. We have a few cities or a few communities within Kansas that are roughly the same size and a few that are smaller.
Do you have some names of communities in Alberta that we could get in contact with, see how things are going there?
Absolutely. So we are operational in Red Deer, Okotoks, Leduc, Calgary. I'm sorry, I'm trying to recall offhand. If you give me one moment, I think I can pull up the remainder in my database here.
Sure.
But I'm happy to provide city staff with additional names to follow up with following the meeting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mitzner.
Are there age restrictions, height restrictions?
Great question. No height restriction. I think that's up to the user. We do have an age restriction in which we want all of our users to be 18 years of age and older. That's different in some of the provinces in which we work, in which we allow 16 years and older, depending on circumstances. It just depends on what Strathmore would prefer. I would suggest, again, either 16 or 18.
Is there options for groups and group rates if someone wants to do it for, say, stag or stagette purposes, where they can have 12 or 15, like a little bike gang running around?
Great question. We absolutely allow the function of group rides, so one individual can unlock for all of their friends. We also sell a variety of different ride passes that offer discounts for multiple users or exactly the kind of scenario that you've described.
So how many bikes would you be considering to put in a community of our size?
Based off of the geography, the population size, the number of visitors that you get, Strathmore could probably support a fleet of between 110 to 130. I think that's probably too many to start.
Wow.
I think we're probably looking at somewhere around the 65 to 75 range, with only a percentage of those being active at any given time.
And
Typically, we start.
One
Go
more
ahead. Sorry,
question.
Councilor.
Are they seasonal? Like, do you put them in from such a date to such a date? You don't have snow tires for these, do you?
No snow tires on these. They would be seasonal for the time being. Stay tuned. Maybe we have something cool coming out in the future, but I can't say too much at this point. What we do is we collect all the devices and bring them onto private property when the weather is inappropriate for them to be out there. We call it hibernating.
Does the season run like from May till October, May till September?
It will be contingent on the weather. Realistically, if you have an unseasonably warm April, potentially it could be out there about a month or earlier. October, generally speaking, within Alberta, that's probably when you're going to start seeing the weather change. But if it's, again, unseasonably warm, might take it to the beginning of November.
And last question, do we as a council have to have liability insurance, or is that all, we're just supplying the place and you're supplying everything else?
So included within any agreement that we have with the town of Strathmore is an indemnification language that would provide a layer of protection. In addition, we would add the city as an additional insured on our general liability policy. So even if there is a claim, it'll be our policy that triggers regardless.
Thank you.
Quick question from me. If a person is riding from one side of town to the downtown area, are they riding on sidewalks in these communities? Or are they? I know we have pathways for them, but what's the status as far as walkability and sidewalks?
Very, very good question. Generally speaking, that depends on the community. Realistically, what I would say is treat them as you would a bicycle. If you don't want them to be on the sidewalk, keep them in the streets. If there is the allowance to have a bicycle riding on the sidewalk in areas where it might not be safe for a rider to be on the road, then the scooter should be allowed in the same way. That's pretty much what the analog is.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Sure. If we were to contact some of the other municipalities, what challenges have they had that you guys have been able to work with them on?
That's a very good question. I think we've had an opportunity through the significant expansion that we've done over the last years to be able to hone a lot of them out from the initial experience. Likely what your fellow councillor identified is probably the one that they would say. Sometimes we have issues around clutter or these scooters being knocked over. The benefit within Strathmore is we would have an exceptionally small fleet, locally based individuals who'd be assisting with the operations. And a geography that would not mean that it would take a significant amount of time to get from one side or the other to correct the issue. So I think we'd largely be able to have a very smooth launch and operation.
Who is responsible for not just creating the zones, but maintaining them, upkeeping them if there's problems?
So all of these zones are digital. We do that on the back end with our dashboards and our operational programming. Bird will create all of those, provide them to the city for sign off. Once we get the thumbs up, we implement them and they go live. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to do so. Not a challenge at all for us to make any kind of dynamic changes.
I see here you're seeking approval for an agreement. The agreement would be between the municipality and Bird. I'm just looking for responsibilities from both sides. So typically in these agreements, what types of responsibilities do you take on? And then what responsibilities, I think most importantly for us, what responsibilities do we take on?
Largely the town is not required to take on any kind of responsibilities. For Bird, the types of responsibilities that we take on include the general upkeep of the fleet, an SLA, a service level agreement in terms of how soon we will respond to any kind of report. Typically it's within 3 hours, although within Strathmore, it's likely closer to between 15 to 30 minutes would be my guess. The time period, realistically, the only kind of responsibility that would fall to the city is any kind of notification should be done in writing rather than over the phone, just so there is a record. We will have a dedicated account manager where city staff will be able to communicate, obviously, over the phone if there is anything that needs to change. But if there's a formal notice, all we'd say is just send us an email.
That's all my questions for Bird. I do have a question for administration, though. For administration, I don't know how much experience you have with this, but have there been any costs associated that are maybe unpredictable when municipalities bring these into their community?
Well, there's upfront costs. There is a cost of staff time. There's not like there's no cost to the town, so we'll have to do a traffic bylaw amendment. The back end here looks a little less than what I'm used to in other communities with improvements that have been made, but I see the front end going up more, working on the zones. I mean, you're going to want to do some community engagement on zones, and whether they're on the roads or on the paths, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's everything from me.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know that for me, this seems like a great opportunity, but I'm also hugely unschooled in the process, and I see with our pathway system lots of potential, and I understand that there's lots of bylaw work to do. But when I was looking at the system, I guess I'm asking if you could speak to why in some of the larger centers like San Francisco, where I think the e-scooter system, your system, left there, or in Paris, where they banned e-scooters recently. What are some of the reasons that have led to the controversy that arises around them, and how could we mitigate some of those or look to avoid them?
Very, very astute question, Councillor. You're looking at two very specific circumstances that occurred within both San Francisco and within Paris. Let me start with Paris. We were actually not operational in Paris. That was some of the other providers that were available working within the city. The referendum that was conducted in such a way to guarantee a particular result. It made it very easy for those individuals within particular wards to gain access, whereas those where there was a high amount of utilization did not have access to the voting polls. It was conducted on the same day as a major race and another referendum where there was online voting available, which was not available for the one related to scooters. I think what you're looking at is two very early hand raisers in terms of, hey, we'd like to try this out, who ultimately decided that a very vocal but very small minority was creating a little bit too much noise to allow for the continued operation of these services. In San Francisco, we did have the opportunity to work with the city for a number of years. Unfortunately, it just came down to a regulatory environment that could not allow for sustainable business operations. The charge for a misparked e-scooter was almost 3 times the charge for a misparked automobile. And the charge for a ticket on an e-scooter was significantly greater. I'm talking 5 to 10 times, depending on the circumstances, than a speeding ticket in many instances. So it seemed more like just an opportunity to overregulate rather than try and create a collaborative environment and allow us to find a means to solve some of the issues. If things should change, I'm more than happy to try and speak with both of those communities and see if we can operate there. Both those municipalities, I should say. I
really appreciate that response, and I understand how that could happen. You mentioned the economic spin-offs. I'm wondering if you would be willing to forward information around that in like-sized communities or communities that have comparable demographics. If you could forward that to our administration as well, because I think that when we enter into community consultation, that will be a really compelling factor.
Certainly, I can forward the scientific study that I mentioned earlier to ensure that that's available to city staff. It does take from a larger city, so I'll acknowledge that, but anything that I can find in terms of data related to a community the size of Strathmore, I'll be sure to forward over as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Mitzner.
Do you have a fatality rate?
Fatality rate or injury rate? In terms of fatalities, we've had hundreds of millions of rides taken within the United States, hundreds of millions of rides taken globally since 2015, to my understanding, globally across all shared systems and across all privately owned scooters, which is where you see the majority of injuries. You have, forgive me, I may be misremembering this, and this is off the top of my head. I don't want to provide wrong information, but I believe it is less than 100 fatalities globally. I'll have to take a look to confirm, but certainly not what you'd consider to be particularly dangerous. Regardless, in terms of injury, multiple third parties have done studies. Every single one of them has kind of drawn the same conclusion. In the interest of time, for summary, roughly about the same as a bicycle.
Is there an option for people to sign up personally, not through the community, if they wanted to use it as a means to commute back and forth to work within the community? Or is this just strictly public?
So there would be no signing up through the community. To be clear, this is all done through our mobile application. The user would agree to a terms and conditions that also includes a waiver not only for Bird, but for the municipality as well. So there are at least 3 layers of protection. The individual is essentially contracting with us when they take a ride. We are simply asking the town's permission to utilize the public right-of-way for the deployment of these devices to act as a public transportation system in function, not in contract.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner. So, Michael, I guess for next steps, you'll be in contact with our administration and our staff, and then we'll wait to hear back from CAO Scoble as far as that goes.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Councilmember.
presentation, CAO Scoble.
I just want to be clear, this was for information tonight, so we would require some direction from council if you want us to undertake any further work on this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peterson?
There is no prepared motion, is there?
No.
Your Worship, I would move that council direct administration to prepare a report on the Bird e-scooter system for council, and that they determine an appropriate timeline within the next quarter to bring that back to council.
Thank you for that motion. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you again, Michael.
Thank you, council members. Thank you.
Have a good
Mr.
evening.
Mayor. You as well.
And that brings us to item 6, consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda presented that any councillor would like to see removed and dealt with individually? Seeing none, then I'm looking for a motion to pass the consent agenda and list each one. Councillor Langmaid? Oh, Councillor Wiley.
We get mixed up all the time. I move that council adopt the recommendations of the following agenda reports by an omnibus motion. 7.1, regular council meeting minutes, April 19th. Section 10.2.1, the WHMB board meeting report from April 20th. 10.2.2, the WADEMSA meeting report from April 17th. And 11.1, Alberta Municipal Water Wastewater Partnership / Water for Life grant.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We move now to item 8, 8.1, Wheatland Regional Emergency Management Partnership Agreement, update to include the City of Chestermere, which is on page 28. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. Good evening, Worship, members of council. If you'd just allow me, I'd just quickly like to introduce for those that haven't met Sarah. Sarah Coots, she's our emergency management coordinator that's been helping for basically the past year. And she's been really steering this with our partners and driving forward. So we're seeing huge gains, and I just want to recognize her talent and what she brings to the table and just introduce you all should you have any questions in the future. She'd be a good resource as well as myself, so thanks. So now I'll just give you a brief overview of the RFD tonight. So I'm just hoping council will approve and sign the updated Wheatland Regional Emergency Management Partnership, which includes the City of Chestermere. Since the adoption of the partnership, all the parties have recognized the benefits of additional resources. By including the City of Chestermere, this is an excellent opportunity for our partners to expand their network and resources to deal with larger scale emergencies or disasters. The larger the event and the longer the event runs, causing significant strain on our local resources. By including the City of Chestermere as a partner, it would increase our capacity and resources available to all parties. Additional funds could be saved by not utilizing external contractors and instead utilizing resources of another member. This item was brought to Committee of the Whole January 11th for information. During this meeting, the pros and cons were discussed, and it was asked council to direct the representative of the committee to vote as per council's direction. Since that time, the committee met on January 26th, where the City of Chestermere attended the meeting, provided a quick presentation on why they'd like to join the partnership, and provided an opportunity for the committee to ask and answer questions. After that presentation, the city officials left the meeting, and the committee voted on accepting the city into the partnership. That vote was unanimous, yes, accepting the city into that Wheatland Emergency Management Partnership. And the only changes to this agreement before you would obviously be adding Chestermere to the agreement And the funding model goes from 50% Strathmore and Wheatland County to 33.3% Strathmore, Wheatland County, and the City of Chestermere. So our overall financial obligation doesn't change, but there is an increase in funding, bringing that other partner in to match our funds. And the most common question that's come up through the process is why the city chose the REMP over their immediate neighbors. And the answer is fairly simple. The city feels that our organization better aligns with their vision and values and sees a better light for the future of their EM program. That's all I have for you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Langmaid.
Just one question. Has the City of Chestermere Council signed on to the agreement yet?
Yes, that's correct. So the city signed first, so we brought it to them to sign.
Perfect.
Wheatland County voted yesterday and signed yesterday.
Okay,
And so we'd be next, and then the villages would follow suit.
thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
I just had a question, and I'm so glad that you brought this forward. It's wonderful. Forgive me if I've asked the question before. On page 7 of 16 of the report, or 38, page 38 of the minutes, it shows the parties to the agreement. And Wademsa's not noted as a party to the agreement specifically in that list, I don't think.
No, so through your worship to Councillor Peterson, so Wadamsa is part of our agency agreement. So this one is comprised of just municipalities.
Gotcha.
So the municipalities are part of this, and then Wadamsa is part of our agency, which includes all the agencies that would help us in the event of an emergency, RCMP, Wadamsa, et cetera, et cetera. So there, I believe there's about probably close to 50 different agencies on that. Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Wegener.
I'm ready with the motion whenever.
Thank you.
All right, I move that council authorize the mayor to sign the Wheatland Regional Emergency Management Partnership Agreement as presented in attachment 1.
Thank you. And now that we have a motion on the floor, is there discussion on the motion? Thanks, Mom. Seeing none, all in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you very much, Chief. Have a good evening. That brings us now to item 8.2, Corporate Strategic Plan and Financial Plan Quarterly Report to the year-end 2022.
So, good evening, Council. I'm pleased to be providing Council with the quarterly update on Council's strategic plan and the town's financial plan for the year ending 2022. So in early 2022, Council undertook a comprehensive strategic planning process that identified 6 strategic priorities, which are listed here. Administration utilized Council's strategic plan to build out the business plan to support the initiatives. As you're aware, Council met early in 2023 to update the strategic plan, which was approved on April 19th. These priorities, along with the supporting business plan activities, haven't been updated in this report just yet, as this report is for the year ending 2022. You will see those changes reflected in the next quarterly report. With this report in front of Council, this is a good time for both Council and Administration to reflect on the progress that has been achieved to date and to focus on what needs to be done moving forward to continue to act upon these priorities. This report will be published on the town's website following the meeting today. So under affordable living, you'll see that most items are on track and the inventory of the town-owned properties has been completed. This inventory will be brought back for further discussion with Council and is being tracked under economic development moving forward. As you will see, the initiative regarding evaluating aging in place opportunities is underway, and our FCSS team is working on a report for Council regarding being an age-friendly community, and additional work around this will also be incorporated into work with the MDP moving forward. Another key initiative that was completed for this priority was developing an advocacy strategy that addresses not only this priority, but several others in Council's strategic plan. We have made significant progress under this priority during the past year. We developed a new budget best practice and business cases that we will continue to refine and enhance moving forward. We provided a report to Council on the town's debt and will continue to work on additional policy recommendations for Council's consideration moving forward. We worked with our investors to make sure that the town's investments align with existing policy, and will continue to provide further recommendations about this to council in the future. Council approved the asset management policy, and this policy has been rolled out internally. Additional work regarding asset management continues to be undertaken as we build out this program. As you'll see, we provided an initial report to council on the town's reserve balances, and we'll be bringing forward a new policy shortly for council to debate. As you will see, the items under intentional community development are mostly on track. We worked with our partners at Shaw extensively in 2022 around reducing noise and other issues to enhance support for downtown businesses. We will continue to work with Shaw around identifying high-priority areas for broadband and other connectivity items. Another positive step that has been taken this year is the initial intermunicipal meetings with Wheatland County. These meetings have been set up so that the town and county can work together to develop an intermunicipal development plan and intermunicipal collaboration framework that benefits the region. Planning for the powwow that was undertaken in March 2023 was also started in 2022 and was an important step regarding reconciliation. As you'll see, work has been undertaken regarding establishing a program for block parties, as we anticipate being in a position to launch them broadly later this year. The items under climate resiliency, including environmental stewardship, are on track. Some key wins in this area are incorporating the sustainability lens in council reports and exploring alternative options around waste diversion, including yellow bins. To support with the land acquisition strategy, staff have been reviewing policies and processes that other communities use, and will use this as a model to provide recommendations to council moving forward. Communications and economic development have been working closely around community marketing to support this priority as well. The key win under this initiative was hiring a very experienced economic development officer to provide support and recommendations regarding business investment, attraction, and retention moving forward. One of the key wins under community wellness was the Volunteer Connector was launched. As previously mentioned, an advocacy plan was developed and is being acted upon as well. One key area of focus for the advocacy strategy has been around attracting medical professionals and services. Administration is reviewing existing grant policies to explore opportunities to enhance community capacity around events and other initiatives, and those policies will be coming forward to council to debate later this year. So switching over to the financial side, as council will recall, we started with providing quarterly updates on the strategic plan and financials in 2022. We will continue to enhance this report moving forward with more detailed reserve fund balances, investment updates, and debt reporting. We've recently brought forward a report on the surplus from 2022, so we will keep this report pretty high level to significant variances that we want to bring to council's attention for information purposes. In terms of next steps, the financial statements will be presented to council in early June. As recently mentioned during our report on the surplus, the 2022 surplus was $797,000, and council made decisions previously about where to allocate these funds into reserves. At the April 19th council meeting, council allocated the surplus and prior years to the water, wastewater, and financial stabilization reserves in the amount of $3.2 million. From a revenue perspective, the town's revenue was approximately 99% of budget, and the franchise fee revenue was $792,000 higher than previously budgeted. This change was made in 2023 to align with our agreement, and in terms of why this change occurred, there was a bit of a timing difference with 13 months of payments that were recorded back to 2022. Grant revenue was down because of expenses that were not eligible. That being said, we have leveraged other grants that were not being maximized to support with offsetting this moving forward. The RCMP expense was $495,000 and was unplanned for. This will be discussed in greater detail during my next report that's on the agenda tonight. Salaries and wages was lower than budgeted due to staffing vacancies and turnover. This is a bit higher due to the great resignation that we're seeing at this time. And garbage collection expenses were lower because tonnage did not align with the amount budgeted. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions, and I just want to acknowledge all of the work that our entire leadership team has done to pull this report together as well.
Thank you, Kara, for your report, and just from me, thank you for all your work, Tom and Kara and the whole department. Just the clarity of it and the ability to get to the bottom of things and come work hard in the budget and give me a lot more understanding of where we were and where we are now. So I really appreciate it. Any questions for Councillor Peterson and Councillor Montgomery?
I know that this is not to identify specifics, but even generally, under priority one in affordable living, one of the things that the community has done through council initiative, brought forward by Councillor Wiley, is that $10,000 was given to the Strathmore Overnight Shelter, and it definitely, I think, follows through with the whole idea of partnership in terms of affordable housing and affordable living, and could be identified here. It seems, I suppose, in the context, a small amount, but it created huge capacity at a time when it was very, very much needed. With your purchase, Your Worship, I would go to strategic priority number 4 in the Climate Resiliency Environmental Stewardship Program. One of the things that we talked about, and this is not a miss on your part by any means, but one of the things that we discussed at length was the Youth Climate Initiative in the community. And I know it's not something for this, but mindfulness going forward, maybe it's something we can continue to look at that, at what we can do in terms of the Youth Climate Initiative. And the last one I have, no, the second last one is related to priority 6, which is community wellness. And I know that we also looked at the rural renewal program, but it's not included here. And I know that there is intent to continue working on it, I believe. But I know that that's something that and I'm sorry, Councillor, or CEO Scoble. Sure.
Sorry, yeah, it's actually the rural renewals under the new plan for this year, and it's under economic development, but it's just the new plan is quite a bridge because there's so much to it, but we have an economic development action plan, and the rural renewal is a component within that plan, and so that plan in itself is a component of the business plan.
I stand corrected, Your Worship, and I'm really grateful to hear that, because that's something that's of a concern, especially to our small business owners or in community. And the last thing I had, the last question I had to administration, I noticed, throughout our capital budget report, this, order and waiting. And is this a supply chain issue? Is this related to supply chain in any way?
I'm going to actually refer this one to Tom.
Thank you, and again, I echo my appreciation. Just so good to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you, Kara, and the rest of the administration for all of your hard work on this. Like, the improvements I've seen over the last few years have been beyond what I would have even predicted, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the transparency and the clarity as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Mitzner.
Thank you again for everything. When we go back to the inventory data that has been collected, we have discussed doing an independent session because it strongly ties into economic development, finance, and affordable housing. So I just want to make sure that this is scheduled as we break for the summer. If it's something we can do prior to the end of June, otherwise we're going into year 2 and we only have a list of inventory. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. Thank you for your report, Kara. Are we looking for a motion here at all? No, we're good. Okay, thank you again, Kara, and all the staff involved. And that brings us to 8.3, RCMP retro payment letter to MP Shields and 2022 operating budget amendment, page 68.
All right, so good evening. Before you again to discuss the recent notification that we received in regards to the RCMP retro payment in the approximate amount of $495,000. Formal notification was received on March 30th, with the original payment due date being April 15th, which has since been pushed to May 15th. As this amount was not budgeted for in the 2023 budget, we have accrued this amount back to 2022 and plan to pay it from the surplus from 2022. This was already factored into the values that were brought forward during the last council meeting, and therefore will not change any decisions made on that front. We just wanted to have full transparency with the public and council. While this amount will come from the surplus, we are recommending that we enter into a payment arrangement with the RCMP for the retro payment. We're proposing to do this out of an abundance of caution around cash flow, given the dollar amount. We're also seeking formal resolution from council to pull approximately $140,000 from reserves, as this was put away specifically for this purpose as partial payment of this invoice. We're also recommending that council approve the attached resolution for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in relation to the need for greater consultation and engagement regarding these decisions by the federal government. We're recommending that council authorize the mayor to sign a letter to MP Shields and include this resolution, and also direct administration to submit this resolution to FCM showing support as well. And so I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Kara. Any questions for Kara concerning this issue? Councillor Peterson?
I just want to know who has to go to FCM to present it. No, I think this is unbearable, if this burden is left with our community. And I want to really recognize our finance department, our mayor and administration for recognizing and anticipating this and being able to set aside funding to recognize that our RCMP officers deserve this and they need to have it. But the way it was rolled out has created an unbearable burden for community. So I appreciate the path that we've embarked on and the support we've had to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery.
Just ready with a motion when you're ready. All right, I'll move that council authorize the transfer from reserve in the amount of $140,174 for partial payment of the RCMP retro pay, and that council direct administration to enter into a payment arrangement agreement with the RCMP for the RCMP retro payment in the amount of $495,942, and the council approve the resolution as approved in attachment 1, and the council authorized the mayor to sign a letter to MP Shields regarding the RCMP retro payment, attachment 2, and direct administration to include a copy of the resolution approved, attachment 1, and that council directs administration to submit a copy of the resolution approved as attachment 1 to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. Is there any discussion on that? Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a quick question about just some of the numbers in these letters. So in the first letter to Martin Shields, I see that we note that the town has been informed that the retroactive payment is $495,942, which is equivalent to a one-time tax increase of 2.5%. But in the other letter, I see that it says that the town is expecting the retroactive payment to be $616,000, which could mean a tax increase of up to 5%. So that I'm just wondering if you could clarify the inconsistency.
So I think originally, and I can't speak for the previous finance team because that was before our team was here, but that was the anticipated number at that time. The number that you're seeing before you is the actual value that has been in the invoice.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was looking at an old letter. I didn't see the date. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Any other comments while we have a motion on the floor? Kara, maybe I can just raise this. It's just a simple housekeeping thing. In the third paragraph, if we could correct the spelling. In the second last sentence, it says the town has seen its annual RCMP policing costs, blah, blah, blah. It's is spelled incorrectly, doesn't need the possessive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I told you it was a small item. Okay, so any other further discussion? All in favor? And that motion is carried. Painfully, but carried. Oh, did they really? No. Oh, jerk. We move now to 9, bylaws, 9.1, 2023 property tax rate bylaw number 23-16, which is found on page 75. Tom, you are presenting on this tonight. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Worried because you're smiling, so I'm hoping you have good news.
Well, I think I have good news. In a weird sort of way, tax rates are kind of an exciting topic for me, so I'll try to make this topic exciting. And I think I had a PowerPoint to upload, Chris. That's fine. Sorry, Mayor and Council, just a little glitch on finding the PowerPoint, but I think it's rather important. It's got some... Because it'll have some good information that we'll just share, just so you can have some relevance to what this means to the average taxpayer and maybe some sample properties out there. So as Chris is bringing that up, so we have before you the 2023 tax rate bylaw. The bylaw that we are presenting is based on the 4.7, or I think it worked at like 4.65% tax increase that council built into the 2023 budget back in December. That 4.7% tax increase was, if you want to slide it a couple forward, Chris, was built on, one more, yeah, was built on certain dollar amounts that we'd estimated at that time for the education levy and also for the seniors housing through the Wheatland Housing Management Board. So at that time, we were estimating about $5.8 million for the education levy. The province, when they announced the education levy for 2023 in March, they froze it at 2022 levels. So from the all municipalities across the province, they froze it at $2.5 billion. So our portion of that ended up being 5.6 in the original budget that we presented. We'd estimated at 5.8, reflecting some increase for the year. The seniors housing, when we prepared the budget, we had estimated for an increase, but not as much as I think the amount that came in for the seniors housing from the Wheatland Housing Management Board. So that amount for them for the year is about $210,000. I think at the time we had about $195,000 estimated for the budget. So with those numbers and with the new assessment values that we received in January, we redid the calculations. And based on that, we're still collecting based on the original $20.79 million. That's what we showed in the 2023 budget. But with that 4.65% increase, it increased the amount of municipal tax from 14.78 to 14.98. So I can kind of get into details a little bit about how that takes place. Chris, if you want to move to the next slide. So it might be a little bit small here, but I'll share this with council afterwards. We can distribute it so you have the details. So you can see on the bottom line there in blue, we have the budget reflected in the middle column. That was data that we had from December, and then the data in the, I guess on the right-hand column of what we have currently. So you can see in the bottom, the average tax increase about 4.6, 4.7%. You can see for non-residential, for commercial, about 4.6%, and for residential and farm, again, that same 4.7% that council wanted even increase for the year. So we've gone through that calculation, make sure that we're pretty well even up there. You can see it's 4.7, 4.6. That's just because of rounding errors. We can't, when we adjust the rates, it's hard to get it precise that it works out even. And as you can see from the second part of that chart on the education tax, the original estimate was 5.8 million, and the amount that notified by the province in March, just slightly under 5.6 million. So that was that $200,000 difference. And what that does, still coming out to the 4.6%, then the amount that's coming to the municipality increases to 14.97 from the original 14.77. So that's that 200 or about $198,000 difference, but still collecting the same dollar of taxes that we'd proposed. So what we're recommending to council for tonight is to give first reading of the bylaw and then coming to the committee of the whole next week to talk about what do we do with that $200,000 difference that bumped up our municipal portion. Council has a number of options before them. Could be a reduction in the tax rate, could be a reduction or moving those dollars into reserves, which is a very common thing when you get maybe some savings from the education levy not going up, trying to utilize that capacity and moving that into something that we can promote or invest back in the community, or a combination of things. There may be some other projects. I think there's a number of projects that will be coming before council that you might want to consider using that additional funding for. So we're recommending that it comes back to the committee of the whole meeting next week, and that you just give first reading to the bylaw tonight. Moving to the next slide, Chris. So I wanted to kind of show council, I think back in December, there was some questions, or I think it was December, maybe January, about, well, assessment values and how does that really flow out in this. So, so I put together here, I grabbed a number of sample properties throughout the town, various values, various increases in their assessments, and also I grabbed what the average assessment is in town. So going to maybe the top line in green, we've got the tax rates. So as you can see that on the left-hand side, we have the 2022 tax rates, the right-hand side, the 2023 tax rates. So if you look under the column for municipal tax, you see this from last year, 6.775. In the column in the right for municipal tax, you see it's gone down for 2023 to 6.614. So that's because the average assessment for an average property went up 8.4%. So that was higher than that 4.7% tax increase. And I think there was a comment back in December about whether tax rates go up or down, or how do they shift when we have those assessment changes. So we want to kind of just show to council that when assessment values go up higher than the average tax increase, we adjust the tax rate accordingly mathematically to make sure that the tax rate goes down and we're not collecting more dollars. And then we run that through a bunch of different scenarios with, say, going to the bottom line there, average, I think this is for a single family house, 350,000. You can see in the 2022. In 2023, that average single house has gone up 8.4% to 379,250. But as you can see in the far right column, at that 8.4%, it comes out to an average increase of 4.6. So we run scenarios through just so council can have confidence and see how that flows through. But then you can see other properties, and every property is unique in town. Nobody's going to be exactly the same assessment increase because I just grabbed these randomly. And as you can see in the right-hand column, you can see the assessment increase for each of the properties. So if you're a 7.7% assessment increase, well, your taxes are only going to go up 4%. So you're going to be slightly below that average of 4.6. We can never make it perfect for everybody. We have on ratepayer 5, they've gone up 11.5% in assessment. A lot of different things, neighborhoods, comparable sales in your neighborhood maybe amenities you have, demand for a certain neighborhood. They've gone up 11.5%. That's going to reflect a 7.6% tax increase. That's just the mathematics of it all. But you can see ratepayer 6 there, assessment value goes up 4.2%. So they're below the average increase of 8.4. You can see that their taxes are only going to go up 0.6%. So again, you have those anomaly or those just variations where nobody is at perfect average ratepayer, and we're going to have, if you're talking to people, oh, mine went up 5%. Well, that's probably because they were a little bit higher than the 8.4% that we had. So maybe they were 9% assessment increase. So that reflects to say a 5% tax increase. For somebody not to have any tax increase for this year, you'd have to be 3.6% assessment increase or lower. So if you're at 3.6 or lower for what your assessment went up this year, you're either same amount of taxes that you paid this year, or you may drop a little bit. I haven't come across too many like that, but there's probably a few out there. And we've seen some areas, I think back in December, or maybe it was January, we talked a little bit about where the assessment values are going. And we've seen probably more increases in some of the lower priced homes because maybe greater demand because of price point in that. Condominiums, mobile homes, we've seen probably greater increases. So just thought this is kind of a good just review just so that you can see how all these numbers play out from the bylaw, and we can share this is information that council like to see, because I think this is the first time you're seeing it, and that's kind of the end of my presentation, and I think recommending first reading. And
do you have a question on this aspect?
Not so much a question. I just really wanted to thank you for this graphic here. This is, we've, as you mentioned, we kind of discussed this, and I think this is going to be very helpful in explaining like how exactly people's tax rates and the amount they pay in taxes changes. Because I'll be honest, I didn't have this clear of an idea before. So this is great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Any other questions or comments for Tom? Question or Tom? I have one question, and maybe it's. I hope it's not stupid. We'll find out. It was mentioned to us a while ago that the RCMP, that portion was under budget, so there was close to 200,000 there for us to consider. Was that used as far as the retroactive pay in the last item that came before us?
No. So the 495,000 was covered under last year's dollars. So we basically, because we received the bill in March, so we applied it back to 2022 because now we knew it. We had to set up as a payable for last year, and we had to expenses last year. So if we hadn't had that item, instead of say a $790,000 surplus, we would have had like a 1.2 million or something surplus. So that's how that works out.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Wiley?
No, I'm just looking for a motion. So my motion is going to be different than the one that we have in the script, but I'm just looking that council direct administration to reduce the proposed property tax rates to reflect the 200,000 in extra revenue, and direct administration to bring a revised bylaw to council for passing. If I could speak to that motion. So as a council, we've talked quite a bit about the challenges that our residents are facing with the burden of just inflation and of course increased property tax. If I understand anything I've learned so far on council, it's that 200,000 would roughly equal about a 1% decrease in taxes for this year, which would put us down to 3.7, which if I remember is actually would make us on the lower end of municipal tax raises for this year. So it would be a really nice token. The second reason I'd like to just see this done is because this extra revenue comes from education requisition, which if it was from any other pot, I'd be happy to put it into reserves, but because it's education requisition, I just feel like it would be best served in the pockets of our residents instead of in our reserves. Thank you.
Just for clarity then, Councillor Wiley, rather than having first reading and the original motion to bring it to us for May 10th to have options considered, you want to bypass that with your amended motion?
Yeah, so what mine would do is it would bypass us needing to talk about it at the committee of the whole. So at the end of the day, if it's will of council to talk about it further, like, of course, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Just picking up from other conversations we've had recently, I think that council's heart is just really in, like, let's just get this dealt with. Let's get administration a chance to just move on and draft up this as a reduction.
So you're still allowing for the first reading motion as well in yours, just to...
No, so in my motion, it's just, there would be a new bylaw would come forward. Instead of a 4.65% tax increase for next year, it would reflect whatever the new tax increase would be. At least that's how I understand it.
Okay, if I can get some clarity from Kara and Chris. Just for procedural, would we have to have a motion to accept his new motion?
Yeah, so there are two options. You could still give first reading and then change the amount. That could be the second motion. Instead of coming back to a meeting, you could do something along the lines of how council will amend the bylaw to reflect that amount of money being reduced in taxes instead of going into reserves. And then that way we could keep the same bylaw, but the amount would be changed for the next meeting.
Does that help you, Councillor Wiley?
Sure, for legislative purposes, would we need to vote down the motion that I just put forward in order to clean that up?
You can withdraw it, I believe.
Are you sure I can?
We haven't debated it yet.
Okay.
No, well, first reading wasn't even going to be given. First, there was no motion for first reading at all. Councillor Montgomery, did you want to speak to this aspect of the?
Well, I don't want to start debating, so like, if it might be cleaner if you withdraw it, do first reading, and then do.
I withdraw.
Okay. Thank you. Now, are you comfortable with the wording that Chris gave concerning your motion, the second part after first reading?
Yeah, so Chris, maybe you'll walk me through this. So if my understanding is correct, I then move the council give first reading to bylaw.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm on. The council give first reading to bylaw 23-16, being the property tax rate bylaw. 2023-16, being the property. Oh yeah, I see the 2023 property tax rate bylaw. And then at this point, would I offer the amendment? Okay.
So we're strictly voting on first reading?
So instead of going on to the second part about the committee of the whole, I'm just moving first reading.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion for first reading. All in favor? And that motion is carried.
So now you can do second reading, I think, with your amendment.
You can do his motion.
Okay, so here we go back to this. I would like for council to direct administration to reduce the proposed property tax rates to reflect the $200,000 in extra revenue. And do I go on? Is that clear? To one. Okay, to reflect the 198,000 in extra revenue.
Thank you. So now
Period.
any discussion on that motion would strictly be concerning the amending motion. Okay. Any discussion on that? Councillor Peterson and then, or Councillor Montgomery, then Councillor Peterson, and then Councillor Wegener.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to thank you, Councillor Wiley, for bringing this motion forward. I certainly agree with your sentiments that at all times, government should take as little as possible from the people that it needs. And we are putting a fairly healthy amount into reserves this year as a result of a surplus from last year and the previous year. So I feel comfortable and I support this motion to reduce the amount that will be increasing taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Peterson, then Councillor Wegener.
Thank you, Worship. At this time, I'm not prepared to support the motion. I do want to hear from other councillors if they have input into this. And I do think that our reserves are still very, very tenuous. And I don't think that the amount that we've put into reserves is anywhere near sufficient. And so that's primary. But I also want to respect my fellow councillors, and I want to hear a fulsome discussion on something of this importance. And I've never seen it be particularly successful when council has set a 3-year plan in terms of setting tax rates, and then not been predictable in that. And that we have in this council reduced taxes before, and it hasn't necessarily been healthy in terms of our reserves. So I can't support it at this time. I'm not saying I won't support it after hearing all the options, but I'm not prepared to support it at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Wegener.
Yeah, I have some concerns with this as well, as I would like to, again, I would like to see a tax decrease as well. My concern is, though, if we put this back as a tax decrease, are we going to come back next year at a double the tax increase because we have given, we've taken this out of, potentially taken this out of reserve, and something comes up, we need that reserve money. Now do we come back at 6% tax increase to deal with this potentially 1% decrease? I need a bit more information on this, and at this point, I'm not ready to support this motion either.
Thank you, Councillor Wegener. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. Can administration please let me know how much we would be able to put into reserves if this motion were successful? Just a rough idea. Like with all the surpluses from the last 2 years, we're going to be putting those into reserves, I believe.
The surplus that we brought forward from the last meeting, yes, that went in, but it's I think the annual amount that we kind of really focus on as part of the budget process, how many dollars, and I think the dollar amount that was going into reserves, this including operating capital for the 2023 budget, I think was about $1.3 million in total. I think there was maybe a couple hundred, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it was in that range, about 1.3 million that we're putting in to reserve. So if we put this amount, then that would bring it up, say, in that $1.5 million range overall.
Thank you. So $1.3 million if we were to move forward with this. And just for clarity, we're not talking about cutting taxes if this motion were to pass. We're talking about increasing taxes if this motion were to pass. I heard a couple people mention like cutting taxes here, and I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
So if you went through with the motion before you to have, instead of the 4.65%, it would be, like you said, 1% lower, Councillor Wiley, so that would be a 3.6, 3.7% tax increase, so that's where it would be. So it wouldn't be, say, a tax cut of going down, but still 3.6% would be the analysis that we would do.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't want the public to be confused as to whether we're talking about cutting or raising. So we are talking about raising taxes regardless, but we're talking about reducing the amount that we're raising taxes. Okay, thank you. That answers my questions.
Just before I go to Councillor Wegener for his second comment, I would be in favor of this amendment. I believe, as Councillor Montgomery stated, we've put a lot into reserves. We've got our debt ratio down to 38%. Again, when I came on council in 2010, it was up at 66%. We've done a lot of work to come in with a good budget. Our finance department was amazing, and we have contributed to our reserves. I know, and I'm sure everybody here agrees, that there are a lot of people really hurting in Strathmore right now and all across the province. So I would be in favor of this amendment because if we could lower the tax rate from 4.65 to 3.65, I think that, I know it's not a large amount monthly, but it's still a help for people who are struggling. So I'd be in favor of this amendment. Councillor Wegener?
Yeah, thank you again. And this is probably a question for CAO Scoble. For a town of our size, how are our reserves? Are we low? Are we medium? Do we need to increase the reserves more? So that's again, that may help me decide on this motion.
Well, I think the mayor put it well. They're we've put money in. They're not quite where they should be, but we're not in as bad a position as we were, and certainly some other municipalities are. So, but they're not quite where they should be, but they're a lot better than they were.
Okay, thank you.
So sorry, I should elaborate on that. Like, that doesn't include, like long-term RMR, right? Like that's more work we have to do with the reserve policy that's coming up. Many communities are putting away, 1 to 2%, some even higher every year for 10 to 20 years to be able to replace the assets they have, right? But we're still not quite there. We're working on that sort of work, and that's the sort of stuff we'll be bringing forward in the future here for the reserve policy.
Okay, thank you. I do appreciate all the work that administration did on getting our taxes down as low as they are. I mean, compared to other municipalities that are in double-digit tax increases, I think administration did a great job on that. So, yeah, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wegener. Councillor Langmaid, then Councillor Peterson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm not prepared to support this motion at this time. Not that I oppose the amendment from its purpose. I understand that I agree that a tax decrease is a attractive item to consider, but I'm also very aware that there are also other options that we might be able to consider. And just given the timing, at this time I'm not prepared to support the motion because I would like to see another opportunity for this to come to council for wider discussion, and that might include coming to the same conclusion, but I don't want to shortcut through the system and not provide that opportunity for fulsome discussion of all the opportunities that we could have and that we might be able to pursue. So for that reason, I won't be supporting the motion at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Langmaid. Councillor Peterson and Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know that, I've sat behind this desk, in council for more than 9 years. And not a single year that I've sat here have I ever heard finance come forward and say that our reserves are anywhere in any way, shape, or form healthy. And there's been reasons for that. The costs that were endured by our community to bring water, for instance, into this community, which was incredibly needful, had to be done. And we incurred significant debt, the debt that our mayor referred to and the debt ceiling that he referred to that happened over a period of years due to that, and then needing to bring on a tertiary water treatment plant and the other pressures that brought. What happened as a result of that is that we wound up with a considerable issue around replacing existing and aging infrastructure. So in this community, we have a problem. We have a very definitive problem in protecting that aging infrastructure. And $200,000 will go a ways if there is a major infrastructure failure in one of our underground infrastructure systems, for instance, if that has to be replaced. Those are critical factors. And so for me, putting that money into reserves is the most mindful thing that a council like ours could do, because it doesn't just protect business owners, it doesn't just protect property owners, it protects every single individual within our borders. And to me, that is really critical. Tax reductions are good. I've never paid as many taxes as I have this year, and it's certainly a factor for everyone. I understand that. But reducing taxes doesn't necessarily help the people who need the help the most. But putting money into reserves does make sure that we can address those failures that might come our way, and inevitably will, because of our aging infrastructure. I can see no better place to serve and protect our community than putting this money into reserves.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Wiley.
Sure, just to keep the debate going. If this increased revenue, this $189,000 increased revenue had come from any other source, just like the last revenue we were trying to deal with, I have no problem shuffling it in the reserves, but this comes from an education requisition, which to me feels like it's not really ours to play with. And I want to focus in on the ratepayers that Tom brought forward. There was this ratepayer number 5. She was paying $475,000. Sorry, she bought her house for $475,000, or owned a house that was assessed at that in 2022. This year, between the increase in her assessment and our increase in taxes, she could be, let's say she was paying $4,000 a year in 2022. This year, it might go up 11%, would go up $400. That's $30 a month. That's $30 extra a month out of her pocket, out of her family's pocket, out of things that maybe she's already tightly budgeted. And I just look at the individuals. So I know that we could use this well in our reserves, but I also know that our taxpayers could use this well as extra money in their pockets.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Is there any further are there any further comments on this? Now, and again, this is a reminder, we're voting on the motion to amend that original motion presented. So all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? And the motion is defeated. So, Chris, if I could turn to you again, do we now restate that original part after the first reading?
Yes, that would be recommended.
Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'd like to move that Council direct administration to bring forward a report to the May 10th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting on financial strategies for Council to consider for the $200,000 increase in municipal property tax revenue resulting from a decrease in the anticipated education requisition.
Thank you. Thank you for that motion, and I'll call the question. Is there further discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? And that motion is carried. So that'll be coming to us on May 10th in a report. Thank you. And thank you for the solid discussion on that. There's a lot of valid points on both sides. That brings us to 9.2, bylaw number 22-07, repealing bylaw number 23-09 on page 83. Welcome back, Tom.
And I have no PowerPoint for this one, so save you the time. So back in January, we presented to Council the first reading of this bylaw. The bylaw was related to a bylaw that was passed, I think, about a year ago, related to some debt on 2 projects from last year's capital budget that we, instead of going in the debt, we pulled or allocated dollars from the MSI grant for those projects. So we brought the bylaw to rescind that bylaw before Council in January. We advertised it because when the borrowing bylaw went before Council a year ago, it was advertised, so we had to follow the same process for rescinding the bylaw. We received no comments from the public on the bylaw, so we've now brought it back to second, third, and final reading for Council's consideration tonight. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Tom. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, I would move that Council give second reading to bylaw number 23-09, being a bylaw to repeal borrowing bylaw number 22-07.
Thank you for that motion. And now that we have a motion for second reading, is there discussion on this? Seeing none. Councillor Montgomery? No. Seeing none, all in favor? And that motion is carried. Councillor Montgomery.
Thanks. I'll move that Council give third reading to bylaw number 23-09, being a bylaw to repeal borrowing bylaw number 22-07.
Thank you for the motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Which brings us now to item 10, councillor information and inquiries. Questions between councillors and council statements. Councillor Peterson? Get it together. Anyone else have any questions? Statements? Between councillors? Well, Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So I wanted to invite the public to come to the council chambers next Friday. So that would be the 12th of May. We will be having coffee with council, I believe at 9 in the morning. So come out, there'll be coffee and donuts, and you can either throw those at council or you can ask questions. So I'll hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Montgomery, for saving me. I just wanted to say that that in terms of WDEMSA, one of the announcements that we are really, really pleased just to note that Alberta Health Services outfitted every one of our ambulances with power stretchers and power loading systems, and this is a value to WDEMSA of over $250,000. So it was really lovely that that happened. It's lovely for our patients, but also for our WDEMSA staff. And the other thing, Your Worship, that I'd just like to say is thank you, profound and heartfelt thank you from behalf of Wheatland Area Hospice Society and Wheatland Housing Management Body and my fellow councillor, Councillor Wagner, to every partner, the communities of Hazar, Standard, Rockyford, Wheatland County, and Strathmore for coming together to support the first phase of the initiative for building a hospice and lodge. I'm very, very grateful to all the work. It's been not always easy, not always smooth, but it's really good to see community come together. I'm very, very grateful to the political persons that had to make those very difficult decisions.
Thank you for that. I think we have no other questions or statements between councillors. That brings us to item 10.2, boards and committee reports. We've passed two in the consent agenda. Item 10.2.3, Wheatland Housing Management Board and Hospice Society report regarding seniors housing and health care. Is that a separate one? That was meant to be in the consent agenda?
No, that was me.
Oh, just now. That was it. Oh, interesting. Perfect. Did it in a different place.
Sorry.
It's okay. 10.3, question and answer period. This is where you might have some burning questions again for CAO Scoble.
Sure.
Councillor Wiley.
Sure. I have a question for CAO Scoble. Everyone's favorite topic right now in town. I've been asked this question more than I've been asked about snow removal. What is happening at the old Leroy's site?
Well, I understand that work will commence there shortly, or recommence, I guess, but perhaps I'll turn it over to Jamie here. I think he's in regular discussion with the site developer there.
Through the chair, yeah, we have been in regular discussion with the developer. They did get caught with some bad weather, and as you know, the weather changes quickly here in Alberta. But they are going to start up pretty quick soon here and continue to move forward. There has been some changes in expected tenants, but they're still moving forward. We actually got another development permit application in for the site, so things are moving forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Mitzner.
In reference to our block party asset, will it be available for people in the community to start utilizing for June, July, and August?
So we're currently investigating some policies and processes that other communities are using around block parties. We do have some like cornhole and stuff like that that we are looking to deploy into the community. I can get a more detailed response back to council after, if that's okay, just because I need to consult with Jonathan a little bit more around timing.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner. I have, I think, an easy one for either Jamie or CAO Scoble. Do we have any paved pathways in the planning for this year? Did we approve any, or do we plan on paving anything?
I'll let Jamie go ahead with that.
Through the chair, off the top of my head, I can't guarantee. I think we have some, but I can't think of where they are off the top of my head. But sometimes those are part of our broader program, but.
And are there
yeah, I can
still
get back to council.
opportunities for us to suggest a couple for next year, or?
Through the budget process, yeah, we can look at
Okay,
that.
perfect, thanks. I'm thinking of Wiley Bridge from Wildflower to Strathmore Lakes area. Yeah. Okay, so any other questions or answers? Then we move on. We have no administrative inquiries, I don't think. And there are no notices of motion. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to go in camera. Councillor Peterson?
Your worship, I would move that council move in camera to discuss an item related to section 24, subsection 1A of the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act at 7:30 p.m.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? And the motion is carried, and we're going in camera. Thank you to all the people at home and in our gallery tonight.